Sophie, thanks so much for being here.
Tom, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So to give our audience an introduction, Sophie is an accomplished entrepreneur and is the founder of The Conversationalist, which is a platform we'll talk about, has a master's degree and an undergraduate degree from UPenn. Also the founder of another platform called Table Talk, all a part of the journey. So very accomplished person out there doing something. You know, we talked about in the first episode, this is going to be really about other people that are out there doing something in the world, right? And looking to empower others to do well and do that through whatever their platform may be. And yours happens to be The Conversationalist. We're really excited to talk about and hear about you as the founder of that platform.
Thanks, Tom. That was such a nice introduction. I'm just grateful to be here. I always like to start off by saying that no matter what I do, where I go, I am a unifier. My whole mission in life is to bring people together, not necessarily always across divides, but just bringing good friends together, which is why I love hanging out with you guys. So that really led me on a journey, but really just hoping that no matter where I go, I'm unifying and bringing people together in any way I can.
That's a good way to be, because Lord knows we need it, especially this year.
For sure. You can say that again.
So that's an awesome place to start, and I think having such conviction in that being your mission and that being a big part of your self-identity is very cool. And so let's go back to the beginning. Like, let's talk about you. So this is your hometown. Let's talk about how you grew up in Wichita and then your journey from there.
This is so fun. It's full circle for me, being back where it all began.
Yep.
So my journey really started here in Wichita.
Okay.
I grew up really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, make a mark on the world. But for some reason, I always felt left out.
Okay.
I think as I started to grow up through lower school, middle school, just quickly started realizing that I was a lot different than my peers. And it manifested very, very blatantly through my religion. I was the only Jewish kid in my entire grade throughout K through 12 education, and largely the entire high school at one point or another, and it felt like the entire community. Yep. So I constantly wanted to make a difference. I had this desire to go out and do big things, but I felt judged, and I felt like no one really understood me, and we couldn't get there because there was that fundamental division between myself and my peers. So growing up here,
And sorry to interrupt. At what point did you really, obviously you're leaning into it now. We have a saying we like to say, the courage to be different. And so when did you feel like you actually recognized that as a strength and started to lean in? Because that's really hard in high school and middle school.
For sure. It took time.
Yep.
I don't think I fully realized it until I left the Midwest and followed the yellow brick road to Penn. But I think I just, from feeling so judged growing up, that led to some sort of shame. And it made me feel like I didn't have a voice. Okay. I didn't know how to relate to others. I wanted to talk about these things that mattered to me, but I didn't know how. So I finally left the Midwest, went to Penn for college, and as soon as I got there, I was so excited to see people beyond the Midwestern bubble. Yep. And getting to college, I think I really leaned into that diversity, but not only the diversity, I finally started finding my own community. I was like, wow, there are other Jewish kids out there like me, and it's okay to be Jewish. It's awesome to be Jewish, because I grew up resenting it and just wanting to conform and fit in. Yep. And so I think as soon as I got to campus, started, experimenting with different groups of friends and different people who I'd never interacted with before, I had this moment where it was the end of freshman year. Okay. I was walking down Locust Walk, which is the main area of campus. Okay. You pass people, you wave, and I realized that I was doing such a disservice to myself by gravitating only towards other Jewish kids. Yep. And then I zoomed out for a moment and realized that every single person on campus was doing the exact same thing, but with their identity groups. Yep. So the football guys on my hall were only hanging out with the football guys. All the Jewish kids were banding together. People really just flocked towards people who are like them. And this was an aha moment for me in realizing, wow, I think I can do something about this. And I think being outside of the Midwest gave me that agency to feel like I could go out and do something and make my mark. And this felt right. I was like, we have to have something on campus to bring us together outside of these groups, because what is life if we can't connect with people who are outside of our own echo chambers? So that was like a beautiful moment that led me down this path. But I think it really originated from growing up here and feeling like I didn't have a voice, and then finally leaving the Midwest to see the world beyond my own community and realized I was just waiting for someone else's permission to say go, but I had that voice all along.
Absolutely. And so that's something that we talk a lot about. So you talked about that, you had this realization at the specific moment on campus. And then how did you find the courage so this is the beginning of Tabletop, right? That's yes. The first platform, right?
Yep.
So that's exciting, which for those of you that don't know, that's a platform specifically focused on college campuses to really create these forums, right, of people from different backgrounds, different walks of life to have meaningful dialogue on important issues and even not issues, but just have conversations, experiences together, correct?
Yeah, and just to make friends, right? It started with this notion that we're stuck in our groups.
Yep.
So Table Talk was a mechanism to bring people together, even just to interact with people from a different background. Because I think that's where it starts, right? We're afraid to interact with people that we coin as the other.
Yep.
But we have so much more in common than that which divides us. So Table Talk was a great beginning for that.
Absolutely. And I think it's a challenge unless you're intentional about it. And that's something I think the world is really realizing now is diversity and interaction with those that are the other, right? That don't look, feel, come from the same background takes intention.
For sure.
And so talk about a big theme that we look to talk on this podcast is taking that first step, the doers, right? To be an entrepreneur, you've got to do something that, like you said, is probably a little weird or not the same. So talk about how you went from that moment, that realization, to the doing of starting that platform.
I am a risk taker through and through. So even though I talked about growing up here in Wichita without a lot of agency to go out and make a difference, I always put myself out there. I was always the kid who auditioned for the lead in the musical. I went out for student body president every year. And even though I kept experiencing that rejection, I had this conviction of just continuing to put myself out there. So I felt that translate immediately at Penn. So as soon as I had this idea, it came from a good friend of mine. His name is Ami.
Okay.
Shout out to Ami. He's the best. He was experimenting with Table Talk at Emory.
Okay.
And so with that existing framework, it gave me a place to start because I didn't know how to start. This was my first time creating something from scratch. So I started to just reach out to every single person on campus. I think I sent an email to every student body president of every organization, just offering to take them to coffee, tell them about this new idea, because I knew in order to make any sort of cultural shift, I had to have buy-in from the people on campus who were really creating that culture. So I hit the cold email. That's always my biggest tip to start. Biggest fan of the cold email, and just started spreading the word. Telling people about it, getting them involved, giving them a stake in the game, and then started to put together a group of people who believed in it as well, and then started to establish a club on campus. And after the club was established, I started having conversations with my friends at other schools and quickly realized that this wasn't just an issue at Penn or from growing up in Wichita. It existed everywhere. This need,
part of the human experience, right?
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate thing that we don't realize it early enough, that we really flock towards groups of like-minded individuals. We're so comfortable that we don't want to disrupt that culture. Yep. But my favorite quote of all time is, the moment you realize that the rest of the world doesn't think like you, that's when you grow.
Absolutely.
So that was a big moment.
And I think when you find someone that you learn to know and trust, that looks, feels, comes from a different space, that's one of the most rewarding relationships you can have, because it is so humanizing, right? In that, look, it's a big world. There is that unique human experience of looking for conformity and community, but when you can find it from someone that is in a different community and start that overlap in a Venn diagram, right? That's pretty cool.
Completely. So that overlap led me down this path, soon started scaling Table Talk to other campuses, and before I knew it, it was at 80 college and high school campuses. So through my master's in nonprofit leadership, evolved it to a 501c3 and was just trying to spread it as far as possible. So that was the Table Talk journey, trying to just get other people in other communities to start breaking that echo chamber.
Yep.
And it was a really interesting experience to start taking this mission and this movement outside of my own space.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think a couple of the themes that, and continued tips for entrepreneurs that are doing something, and two of them really, I think, shine through the story that you're telling there, is one is the importance of step one, right? And a lot of people want to think about the big thing, and there's a quote by Mark Benioff that people overestimate what you can do in a year, but underestimate what you can do in a decade, right? And doing that step one, it snowballs quickly, but step one is very not sexy, right? It's sending a cold email saying, hey, I'm doing this piddly thing, and that's humbling, but you got to do it, right?
Totally.
And then the other is partnerships, right? And so I think we'll touch on that theme because I think everyone go check out The Conversationalist. What's the @ sign?
At The Conversationalist.
At The Conversationalist. So that's going to be the next platform we talk about, but you do a great job of partnering, and it sounds like that started at the tabletop.
For sure. And I think what you said is so true, Tom, that Rome wasn't built in a day. I think our generation, at least I can speak for myself, we're so trained to think about instant gratification, and it's got to start somewhere. Yep. And so whether it's a cold email, even a conversation at the dinner table, it all starts from one moment. Yep. And I think the thing that's kept me humble throughout all of this is realizing that my mission as a leader is not to build followers or to bring followers along for the ride. It's to build more leaders and better leaders. And I think Table Talk really taught me that, to take this idea and then empower others to go out and create this movement themselves. Yep. And it's not about any one of us. It's about something much bigger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Leadership is definitely something that I think is very intriguing and something that I spend a ton of time reading about others. And that's a theme that in many of the great leaders, they talk about how it can be easy to try to be an empire builder, but the best, Jim Collins could agree, the best organizations, which is what we're all trying to build, is a lasting impact, right? An organization is by building other leaders, right? How do you backfill your own self, right? That's in the community that you're building is huge. And so let's go from the tabletop. So then let's fast forward to what's next. How do we get to the first step of The Conversationalist?
And what you just shared, Tom, was such a perfect segue, because I think I started to realize that the foundation for this movement that I was building wasn't necessarily as strong as I had wanted it to be. I had met all of these incredible leaders across different campuses in different communities, creating this organization on their campus, but quickly realized that maybe that's not the most sustainable way to build. In order to start anything, whether it's an event, a movement, a club, you've got to have that entrepreneurial spirit. And not every young person is built to start a club. And so I went back to the drawing boards and started doing a lot of reflecting on how we can make this a more focused mission. How can we reach more people in a more impactful way beyond clubs? And so fast forward to 2016, a very divisive year for our country. I think for the first time, I had realized how thick those walls were in my own echo chamber. At Penn, no dialogue was happening around the presidential election. And the conversations that were happening and the movements and the clubs that were tabling on campus were all representative of one side. And I started to feel very frustrated that there wasn't a place or a forum or a location to explore different types of ideas, especially across the political spectrum. And so the day after the election, when we heard that Donald Trump became our president, it felt like someone on campus had died. There was this energy. It was raining, much like today. People were huddled together on campus, really, really upset and shocked by the fact that Trump was president, which I completely understand. And I think that uncovered and peeled the curtain back behind the concept of an echo chamber. And in that moment, I remember where I was sitting in class, and I had a professor who was preaching his own political beliefs to the class. And I was feeling so frustrated that there wasn't a dialogue. There wasn't a place to talk about this and explore why this had happened. And I stood up, I left class, I walked right out of the room.
Kudos.
Took to my laptop and started writing. I think for the first time, I hadn't really used my voice to share what I believed in a concentrated way. So I started writing about this concept of the echo chamber and how in the future we can prevent these situations from happening by simply knowing what other beliefs are out there, and how we can start breaking that echo chamber simply by following people who don't think like us on social media, by establishing some sort of dialogue that opens conversation. When I put that down on paper, I felt like that was a spark that was ignited within me. And that column got published in the Huffington Post. And from that, was the impetus for the Conversationalist.
Awesome.
Not only was there this need to bring people together across backgrounds, but there was such a need for dialogue.
Yep.
And that echo chamber runs so deep in all of these communities that we've been trying to bridge. So I started doing some research, did some quality market research to better understand why we're struggling to have these conversations.
Yep.
And through those insights, mixed with this frustration I was feeling around the election, plus some guidance from an incredible mentor, shout out to Rich Keller, really helped me understand that there was another way to make this impact. We as a generation need a place to go to make sense of the world together.
Yep.
And have these important conversations from people from all walks of life and have that diversity, but not only in backgrounds, but in thought. And so that idea, that spark really led towards what the Conversationalist is today. And it has evolved and iterated many times over, but the core of our mission has stayed true, which is unifying and bringing people together with a common purpose to tackle these difficult conversations and start developing and fostering empathy, understanding, and respect.
Awesome. It's amazing it's amazing how unifying leading with listening can be, right? If your objection isn't to project your own view or exactly what your professor was doing, was get in a pulpit and projecting versus creating a platform where you can have engaging, thoughtful listening happen is pretty cool. So I've got a couple of stats, right? And I think the platform that you're building is as important today as it ever would be. And there's a couple of stats that I think are relevant, right? So there was a Wall Street Journal NBC News study that says 80% of the population in the U.S. thinks the country is mainly or totally divided. Which is crazy because although we come from so many different backgrounds, different places, thoughts, there's a very commonality amongst the human experience, right? The figuring out what your identity is, trying to find that community, and it's really unfortunate that those are the stats, right? That many people feel like we're starting at a place of division, and that's the primary descriptor of this great country that we live in, right? That's tough to hear, and I think people who take great pride in this place and in this country, it's frustrating and it's awesome to see other people out there doing something. So huge kudos for the starting, right? For the getting out there and doing it. Rome wasn't built in a day, as you said, but you've already got a huge following and kudos for that. So those are some of the unfortunate statistics, but let's talk about where you see the platform working, because I know we were talking at breakfast earlier and you're seeing it. You're seeing those things happen. So why don't you talk about a few of those examples?
You got it. I mean, those statistics are real. And I think we should lean into them and acknowledge them and hold space for them, because that's the harsh reality of our society right now. There are so many forces out there to divide us, but there are also so many incredible forces to unite us that I don't think we lean into enough.
Yep.
And oftentimes that divide can happen intergenerationally. And so right now, our main focus, of course, is to unify the world. That is our mission, but we're starting with Gen Z. We really believe in the power of the next generation to ignite these conversations, to bridge those divides, and to really take action on these important social issues.
Yep.
To bring us together. And so it's been incredible to see how Generation Z is leading the charge to create this sense of unity. And I have so many stories that come to mind. I mean, I feel so grateful that I spend my days 24/7 just watching these incredible change makers talk, connect, learn, laugh, and grow.
Yep.
Through these difficult issues. And I have one story that I'd love to share.
Hit it.
So we can all agree that 2020 was a very tumultuous year. So many things happening, from the pandemic to the political divide to the election. And something that we really need to also talk about is the Black Lives Matter movement. And in May of 2020, after the horrible Ahmaud Arbery tragedy, there was this divide also between racial groups. And we decided to host an event, and we brought 7 Black activists together to have a conversation that I moderated about how can we take what is happening in the world and channel action through our generation and beyond. What can we learn from this? How can we prevent hate crimes from happening? where do we even go to start dismantling this discrimination and racism that we've seen for far too long? And through this conversation, about 5 of the 7 activists, after the conversation was over, decided to continue that conversation. And they went on to found their own organization. It's called Breathe. Every letter of Breathe stands for someone who has lost their life to gun violence or a hate crime in the Black community. And they are now creating legislation, garnering petition signatures, protesting in the streets, and taking on this issue in such an action-oriented way that sparked from the conversation. And so I think we have to give Gen Z some credit for being that force, that cohort, that catalyzing group to create and incubate these ideas that will unite our country. And it's been remarkable to watch. And now I think their petition has 15,000 signatures, and they're impacting legislation against police brutality. And that was all sparked from a conversation. So I feel super grateful that I can create these moments of unification and create the space in the forum to amplify these voices that can then move forward and spark a change. So there are so many crazy statistics out there to scare us, and the media doesn't help with that. But when we get back to the essence of action and starting these important conversations, it shifts the tide. It turns the tide to show what young people are really all about, which gives me immense pride to be a part of this generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an excellent example of catalyzing action, right? And I think, again, the doer, right? Let's go do something, right? It starts with one signature and starts with one conversation, and then you never know what that catalyzes. And even beyond, it's the right thing to do, right? I think that's fundamental. That's the right thing to do, is to have those unifying conversations and have the ability to disagree on different aspects of that issue and other issues, but be able to have unifying progress, right? And that's what it's about. And I think beyond it just being the right thing to do, it's our world is business. It's an extremely employable skill, and one that is not as prevalent in the workforce as you would think, right? And future leaders have to be able to do that in their businesses, in their endeavors, is to foster communities and other leaders that can have productive dissent, is what I think the word is, right? And so if you do that on causes you're passionate about, you can bring that same ability to work and disagree with a colleague, and know that it's for the progress of that institution, of that organization. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, is having those conversations that lead to progress, and whether it be in business, in the realm of social issues. I think it's such an important skill that it's great to see parts of the generation Gen Z taking the flag for that, because not all of them do have it, right? And I think that's it's important, and being intentional about building that skill as a leader first, and then as a participant as well is great.
Agreed. And Tom, I noticed that you said having these conversations is the right thing to do.
Yep.
I believe that. I know you believe that. But I think there's also this other reality that we should consider, that not everyone believes in coming together. Unity is an ideal.
Yep.
But what I've learned the hard way is that not every single person wants to create this beautiful future where we're all coming together, celebrating our diversity, allowing all voices to be heard. And it's important to recognize that is also okay.
Yep.
And something I think we neglect often in these conversations is realizing that the purpose of conversation, like you said, is not necessarily to agree. There can be productive dissent. But I think something we forget is that the intention of conversation isn't to try to bring someone over to your side, yes, or to change their mind. And I think if we enter these conversations or these moments with that intention of learning, understanding, asking questions, growing, you'll be so pleasantly surprised that someone might want to come over, or might even just want to consider another perspective. But I think it's all about the intention. So it's something interesting that we've been experiencing, that we think this concept is universal, that everyone should want to come together, create that better future. But there is a reality that people don't necessarily want that, and that is also okay, but is not a reason to stop. It's a continue to keep going and to bring people in, call people in, to this ability to hear other sides and other perspectives, because that is the most productive way to get to change. But I think it's important to recognize that this beautiful future where we're all coming together and creating unity is going to take time, and is also one that not necessarily every single person will buy into. And I think that's a challenge that entrepreneurs face. You know, there are always going to be haters, people who are not buying into what you're selling, even if it's a concept as easy as conversation. But it's important to recognize that, because it's all the more reason to have conversations and understand why people might envision a different future. Or maybe you'll realize that the common ground that we're looking for is inherently the same, but we have different paths of going about getting there. So wanted to add that in.
No, absolutely. And I think, agreed, you certainly shouldn't start out with the mission to change everybody or bring them over, because, man, you're going to be disappointed quick. So
true.
And that's part of, I think somewhat selfishly, part of why we started this podcast, which is called The Listener, was to, as we build our business, be exposed to some people that may disagree with us or our approach, or just be exposed to other viewpoints that will be valuable just to take in. And whether they agree with us or not, they're people too, right? And so let's learn. Let's learn.
Yes. And I love that is the title of this podcast. I think so often we even enter conversations with the intention of speaking or changing someone's mind, like we just said, or half listening, preparing your next thought, racing to the finish line, trying to win. But it's so important to take a step back and listen. I think lately I've been trying to listen more than I speak, and just see how I can be a sponge and bring in new ideas that maybe I wouldn't have considered previously, because it'll either reaffirm my own beliefs and convictions or open me up to a new idea. So just really appreciate everything you're building to create that space where actual listening happens, because that's so rare nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to intentionality. I mean, for me, I love doing it and appreciate the sentiment there that we are trying to build something where we are listening. And it takes attention. I mean, you as an entrepreneur know that a lot of times your mind can be racing, and that can also embody itself in speaking and trying to work through your own thoughts. And so sometimes I find myself needing to shut the heck up, right? And so, leading with listening and trying to be intentional about it, we got to practice what we preach, because it's not always the easiest thing, right? So let's get back to your platform. Thank you for the compliment.
We digress.
So in the Conversationalist, right, I think a theme that we wanted to touch on. So thank you for the story, right? That's one of the things we want to hit on. But as you look to create more of those stories, more of those things, a really important thing, I think, for entrepreneurs and anyone building something, and we were even talking about this with Jenny. Jenny Dawn, thank you for hosting us.
Thanks, Jenny.
We'll get to hear from Jenny here later, but is the importance of partnership, right? And if you're going to build something, you surely can't do it alone. So why don't you talk about how you, I think, very successfully have leveraged partnership as a strategy, and some of the partners that have been a part of your journey at the Conversationalist?
Partnerships are everything. And I think when we hear the word partners, we often think corporate partnerships or strategic partnerships, but every single person who I interact with, in my mind, is a partner. At the end of the day, my biggest mission is to build relationships. And my biggest philosophy is you are only as good as the people who know you.
Yep.
And you want to make sure that how you're presenting yourself to the world is how you want people to go and share your mission around the world. So with partnerships, I think it started with Table Talk at Penn, and realizing that if we wanted to move the needle, if we wanted to have these conversations, we needed to get buy-in from the biggest players on campus. So going back to the 2016 election for a hot sec, we wanted to have a conversation around the election and what brings us to the polls as young people. And as we created that event, we invited every leader in the political space on campus to plan it with us. And we had a meeting, we sat around the table, we tried to see what everyone wanted to get out of the event, what questions they wanted to ask. And because of that buy-in, they brought their people. They spread the word. They bought into this mission because they had a voice. They had a seat at the table. And I think at the end of the day, as human beings, all we want at the end of the day is to be seen and heard and valued. That's the fundamental human want. And so partnerships, in my mind, is just a way to help others feel like they're a part of what you're building and pulling up a seat at the table.
Yep.
And so even something as small as planning events and conversations with others brings them into the fold. And that's carried through in the way that we've built our community. Every single young person that's in our app, on our social platforms, in all of our events, they are a part of our mission. Yep. And we give them that ownership to take this and make it their own.
Yep.
And partnerships, in my mind, has been the bridge to get us to the next place. And so it started on campus. It now has grown to these other leaders around the country. And now we've been able to really leverage other partners outside of the Gen Z bubble to help us get to the next level. So we've brought in a lot of interesting influencer and celebrity partners to have these conversations with us because, again, we're giving them a huge seat at the table. They have so much to share and mentor and give our young adult audience.
Yep.
So by giving them that agency and being a part of what we're building, we've been able to get to their audiences and build and grow and leverage that partnership in a really authentic way because we're playing off of their passions and we're giving them a voice to come in and empower the next generation to do the same.
Yep.
And so partnerships, in my mind, are really just a bridge to get you to where you need to go. But oftentimes that bridge might lead somewhere that you didn't even expect. So partnerships is the lifeblood of our organization. And it's been interesting to watch partnerships manifest in different ways throughout my journey. But at the end of the day, it's all about aligning with people who share that passion and that mission that you're holding.
Yep.
And giving them a way to spread their light and their vision through the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, so often entrepreneurs, when you're trying to build something, it can be what people approach partnership in a what can others do for me, right? And eventually, absolutely, right? I mean, it needs to be a two-way street. But we were actually talking to our accountant the other day, Katie Smith, who said, if the tide rises, all ships rise, right? And so you think about your community that you're looking to build, and if you can go help, like you said, pull a table up or pull a seat to the table for someone else in that community, I think people will be amazed at what comes back. And if you take that approach to partnership, that's how we're building Geist is through partners, right? And how can I help you? And here's what we're about, and aligning in values. And if you surround yourself with partners and help people, then you'll be amazed, I think, at how that comes back. And that's a huge piece of advice I would share for any entrepreneurs as you're building something. Take a partnership approach, and it can be as simple as mentorship. It doesn't have to mean one thing, but go find how you can help others and build a community where you are adding value, and then it'll come back.
And it's a mindset, right?
Yep.
Like just wanting to add value to someone else with no other agenda is the name of the game. Obviously down the road, it's nice to have that back, to have it be a two-way street, but my biggest mantra is being able to go out there and see how we can help and add value to others with no hidden agenda, oftentimes, to help support us or help grow the platform or get the word out. But by positioning partnerships in that way, you'll be so shocked at who wants to get involved and wants to help because you're a giver instead of a seller or a taker.
I think we've talked about some important themes, some important pieces of advice for others that are looking to build something. But let's keep unpacking what you've built, right? And there's great advice for how to build, but let's talk about what the actual result is. And so let's talk a little bit more about the Conversationalist as a platform and the different elements, right? So I know it's a community of people who are engaged in these conversations, and there's also an application that is an extension of, or a forum for that community. So why don't we talk a little bit, kind of the nuts and bolts of what it is? Why don't you describe for the audience that?
For sure. Thanks, Tom. So as a community, we as a brand are just trying to create as many ways as possible to amplify Gen Z voices. That's our whole purpose. We're on a mission to amplify voices, one conversation at a time.
Yep.
And so our community right now is housed on a third-party platform called Geneva.
Okay.
We love the Geneva team. It's been awesome to build alongside them. It's a forum, almost like if Slack and Clubhouse and Facebook groups and GroupMe had a child. So there's audio, video, and chat-based communication where we have different rooms dedicated to different topics. Everything from mental health to racism to body image to current events to economics and more.
Yep.
We've also got meme channels and pop culture because we're just trying to build social ties and build a network of awesome young people. And it's 24/7 communication of young people talking about these issues, diving into difficult takes on those issues, and also providing different events for our members to hang out and get to know each other. So for the most part, all the action happens in Geneva.
Okay.
And then of course we have our content. So we always say our secret recipe is community and content.
Okay.
And our content is through our social media platforms, primarily on Instagram, creating moments of conversation and learning through the voices of our members. So if we have a conversation on the app, we're trying to find a way to share it on our social platforms to get people involved in the conversation, because it's not just about you and me or the people on the platform, it's for everyone. So really the nuts and bolts of the platform is on the Geneva platform, it's on our social media platforms, and from those two places, we have different events and offerings in which we're continuing to amplify Gen Z voices. And one other way that we do this is through our panels. So we have different events that are led by our Gen Z members, by other celebrities, partners, and people who interact with our brand to allow for Gen Z voices to be heard. So something really fun that we've been doing over the past 6 months has been creating conversations where we bring in a Gen Z celebrity, if you will. We've had some awesome people from Nickelodeon's iCarly and Ned's Declassified, all the way up to American Idol and The Bachelor and Mean Girls. And we bring in and leverage these popular entertainment properties to allow for everyday young people to be heard. When's the last time you went to an event where there's a celeb where they're not the focus?
Right.
And we thought, what a cool way to turn the tables and let young people be the focus and let them be the centerpiece to allow their voices to be heard. So we take a controversial topic. We did a whole political series leading up to the election, and we would bring a celebrity in to talk about this topic that mattered to them, but serve as the moderator and the guide. And I think that's been crucial to the lifeblood of our organization to make sure that no matter what we do, we are staying true to our word of amplifying Gen Z voices. So between the app, between our events, between our content, everything we do is laddering up to this overall vision of breaking open echo chambers, having these conversations, and letting those Gen Z voices be heard. So that's a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what we've built, and we're still growing. We've only been on this platform for about 6 months.
Yep.
But I think the pandemic gave us a really unique opportunity to lean into community. Gen Zers who are typically in school don't know when they're going to be with their people again. Classes are online. Everyone is so anxious for human connection, and Generation Z is coined as the loneliest generation, but also the generation that's most likely to struggle with their own mental health issues.
Yep.
And so at the very fundamental level, we just wanted to provide a place for them to go.
Awesome. So a couple of things. One is, like you said, Rome wasn't built in a day. And what I find is that what are some pieces of advice in terms of the routine, right? You have to be creative as an entrepreneur. You have to try some wild things. But in terms of your foundational building blocks of, I know I need to execute on this, what are some of the things in your routine that give you kind of the peace of mind and the cadence to just keep doing as you build? So what is some interesting aspects of your personal, like do you sleep certain times? Do you do content certain times? What is the tangible building blocks that has helped you build this so fast?
It's not easy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not the best example to showcase good self-care. I'm always hustling, not sleeping a lot. I don't have a really good work-life balance, which is not the best thing, but also I think it's because I'm so passionate about what it is I'm doing. And so I would say some of the key ingredients are really understanding the person you're trying to serve.
Yep.
For us, we're not just trying to think of something.
Great. Yep.
Like we're not just trying to invent something and we think it's gonna hit. We're talking to our members every single day and hearing what they want and what they need to build the best possible product for them. So for an example,
listening. Sounds like you're doing a lot of listening.
Listening, so important. I think something that we forget is that right now as young people, and with the current state of the world, social media, the news, everything is so saturated, it's hard to cut through the noise.
Yep.
So a huge piece for us was understanding that with that shortened attention span, we've got to create offerings that really connect and connect quickly.
Yep.
So all of our events, all of our content is very short.
Yep, okay.
And so that was a huge thing to learn early on, that we're going to offer something that will give value, but not going to last forever. So it doesn't feel like a time commitment so our audience can buy in. One example, every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, we do this thing called And We're Live. It's in one of our rooms on Geneva. We pick a controversial topic, something crazy that people don't really talk about ever. We open up the room for 30 minutes only. People go at it, and we give them the prompts. We guide them along the way, and the app shuts down multiple times because people are just going. And then at 30 minutes, we close it and we end it so that hopefully they'll come back or continue it in another room, hop in the video room, talk face to face. But that was a really interesting learning that we just innovated out of thin air because we were like, let's do something different. What is something that no one's doing to tap into the needs of our audience? So I think that's a huge component, knowing your consumer, knowing your community member well enough to serve them.
Yep.
And I think secondly, something that's really helped along the way is meeting people where they are.
Yep.
A huge technique for us in terms of growing our social following and building community has been finding Gen Zers where they're already living and not necessarily just trying to sell, but build relationships. Again, crucial to what we're doing. But every single day, we cold DM 50 to 100 random young people. That has been the core of our mission. I coin it as door-to-door marketing in 2021, finding young people where they are, but not just selling them a product, but trying to build, understand them, bring them into your world. And I think being able to meet people where they are and acknowledge that not everyone is going to be a perfect conversationalist on day one. People don't really know what you are or who you are at the beginning, but meeting people where they are at their level, but also physically, geographically, understanding them better has been huge to help us build.
Awesome. So it sounds like there's a couple of things there, right? Is always listening to the customer if you're an entrepreneur, right? Always listening, or maybe not even a paying customer yet, right? Just a constituent. And then quickly, in the smallest way you can, building something that adds value and then doing that consistently, right? Time and time again. You're doing short form content that is engaging to what you know your listener wants.
And I would add one more thing.
Go for it.
Taking it to the next level, something that I've learned that I wish I knew earlier was that oftentimes when you're building a business, we're trying to cater towards people who are not in our world.
Okay.
Brands will offer discounts to new customers. If you sign up for their newsletter, 10% off. But brands aren't investing in the people who are living and breathing their brands. And so a huge pivot that we've made is focusing first and foremost on the core of our community. These amazing young people who are living and breathing our brand, listing us in their bio on Instagram, repping our merch, chatting all day long, building friends on the platform, and investing in them as our core group rather than trying to just be everything to everyone, bring more people in. I think that's something that a lot of people forget about, is investing in your people.
Absolutely, yeah. So never losing sight of the core business, right, or the core community that you're serving. I think that's something that as entrepreneurs you also have to be intentional about, right? We're idea people, right? We love, like you said, putting ourselves out there, trying, and you've got to be careful to. One of the things we say is it can be exciting to have a new sale, but did you take care of the existing client, right? And that's something that
important.
Yeah, super important. And it sounds like, so one other thing I'd like to touch on before we again thank the venue hosts and wrap here is, it sounds like you're building something where you're, like you said, meeting people where they're at, building a forum that I think creates normalcy for something to be said, possibly even that crosses the line in a forum, right? And then instead of canceling that person, there's a community there that exposes them to a different point of view. And I think we both touched briefly on that cancel culture is in fact detrimental to the very thing it's trying to solve. In that instead of exposing someone or allowing them to continue to listen and learn, you shut down that cycle of learning. And that's something that's tough for me to see. And I think kudos to you for building a platform that I think, can hopefully encourage people not to say things that would be cancelable, but also B, instead of canceling someone, coming to listen and understand. And so why don't you talk a little bit about what your view is on that and how you're seeing, and I think instead of canceling, listening happen on your platform.
We could have a whole other conversation about cancel culture. Guess we're going to start unpacking the suitcase. But, it's tough as a brand that's trying to create this environment for free speech to really take a stance on certain topics. We really pride ourselves in being nonpartisan. But when it comes to cancel culture, we have a firm stance. Because cancel culture is the antithesis to dialogue. The idea of canceling someone, removing them for a misstep or a wrong statement, prevents any notion of dialogue. We even have tie-dye hoodies that say cancel culture. So we got to hook you up.
Oh, we got to get one of those. 100%.
They're amazing.
Yeah, that's
I wear it
fire.
every day. I'm shocked I'm not wearing it right now. But I think that encapsulates how I feel.
Yep.
We know where the line is for the most part, because
Yep.
there's obviously a reason to hold someone accountable when something
Absolutely.
horrible happens. I think of the Me Too movement. There are some horrible people out there in the world. We need to hold them accountable.
That's a great example of where the line is, right?
Yeah, and I think that line is often presented through sending that person to jail. That's like the ultimate form of canceling someone.
Yep.
And I think it's important to learn how to call someone out for their wrongdoing with the intention of helping them learn and grow, and then calling them in to make that change.
Yep.
I think we're so quick to judge. We don't know what someone has gone through. We don't know what information they've been privy to before this incident. And maybe I'm just an optimist that humans have a fundamental want to grow and be better. But I think we've got to give people a chance.
Yep.
I try
And that's hard. I mean, I think people underestimate, even if you look at someone that's saying something that you disagree with, it can be hard for yourself not to just dismiss, right? And so it takes reps to do the reaching out and calling in, right?
Yeah, and you got to know what that situation could look like if you were in it.
Yep.
I really try to flex my empathy muscle and think, if I tweeted something back in middle school when I knew nothing about the world and someone wanted to remove me from society for a statement that I made when I didn't even have the maturity or the knowledge that I have now to make that decision.
Yep.
I try to put myself in their shoes. What would I want in that moment? How would I want to be learning and growing? I think an interesting parallel, though completely separate, is the criminal justice system. The purpose of the criminal justice system is not to completely remove someone from society forever, but is to help them be better and to reform.
Yep.
And I think we lose that at times because we're so willing to hop on the bandwagon of groupthink
Yep.
and shut people down. But in order to have a society that thrives on free speech and being able to exchange ideas, we have to get back to the essence of our society and open up those conversations, no matter how difficult they may be. So I always say we got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and also know yourself well enough where you need to set a boundary, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's tough. We could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, that's
so
a big
I'll cut
thing to
myself
unpack.
off.
No, and it's so important too, because I mean, Lord knows, again, I've done some things that were probably cancelable, and you got to look at yourself humbly and realize, like, man, I've probably done some stuff in my not so proud moments.
Sure.
And knowing that about yourself, and then giving people that grace to get a chance, right? And really lean in.
And one more thing before we wrap.
Yep.
I had an awesome conversation with my friend Ziad a couple weeks ago, who
Okay.
runs a Gen Z marketing firm. He's awesome. He instilled this idea in me when it comes to cancel culture, that the root of the problem is that we have this ideal that humans are perfect.
Right.
And we are free of the idea that someone can make a mistake. And I think if we can rid ourselves of that idea that we need to be perfect all of the time, that can humble us in a way to see someone else's lived experience. I am far from perfect. And I think it's just something to remember, that we should be striving for better, not perfect. And I think that will help us call people in these hard moments and actually have the dialogue that can move us forward, rather than just throwing a Band-Aid on it and removing them from your newsfeed, unfollowing them, or just taking them out of your purview, because that's not a solution.
People are not perfect. We know that much, especially especially about ourselves. So, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. This is an awesome venue. Some great wine. So Jenny Dawn was kind enough to host us here in Wichita. I've had the Cab and the Pinot. They're both fantastic. We're going to talk to Jenny here shortly and have a conversation with her as well. But great venue. If you're in Wichita, highly recommend. And we can't express our gratitude enough to her for hosting us for this very cool venue.
Jenny, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's online as well, for sure.
Wichita Pride.
For sure. And again, thank you. This is the exact reason we started this podcast, and we're so humbled that you were willing to come on and very much live up to your name. You're an excellent conversationalist. There is no doubt about that. That is a very strong gift of yours. So thank you for coming on, and look forward to this not being the end of the conversation. So thank you.
Tom, thank you. I am so about what you're building with Geist. I think not enough people are getting back to the essence of driving good in the world. And I think it's amazing and remarkable how you're doing it through business. So thank you for including me and creating this space, and just so grateful that you came all the way to Wichita to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Awesome.